So yes, I love the Friday the 13th franchise, but I will say that 5-year time span between Friday the 13th, 7, 8, and 9, that has to be the craziest 3 movies in the entire franchise. So let's talk about it. What is up, everybody? Welcome to Mad Blood, and today I'm going to be talking about kind of the rise and fall of Friday the 13th, Part 7, 8, and 9, a 5-year time span in the franchise, which does have some really fun moments, but also has some of the biggest what-if moments in the franchise, one of the best kills in the entire franchise, and also arguably the most divisive movie in the franchise as well. So yeah, of course, we're gonna start off by talking about Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood from 1988. So yeah, after Jason lives, Tommy sunk Jason to the bottom of Crystal Lake. But this whole idea and concept of just Jason at the bottom of Crystal Lake has to be one of my favorite Jason kind of campfire stories in the entire franchise. And what's also interesting about The New Blood 2 is kind of for the first time in the franchise, they introduced another villain outside of just Roy, Pamela, or even just Jason. Now in this one, we even get 2 kind of sort of like villains also in this movie, which also adds to the movie. We get Melissa and then the psychiatrist, Dr. Cruz, as well. I mean, come on, that bastard Dr. Cruz uses Tina's mom as a human shield. But also first, I want to talk about the look of Jason in this movie. From the moment he comes out of the water, you see that shot of the back of him where you can see his spine. He is waterlogged. He is nasty. He is juicy. The skin is worn away. His outfit is all worn away. He's got the chain around his neck. Easily one of the best looks of Jason in this entire franchise. The mask is broken. You can see his jaw. But even director John Carl Buechler wanted Jason to basically show all of the damage he's gone through in the other 6 movies in the franchise. Every cut, every slice, every just little piece of damage he wanted to be seen on the character in this movie. And like I said, is just a look for Jason that I really, really like. It is one of the best looks in the franchise, without question, in my opinion. And yeah, of course, this is the first of 4 appearances in the franchise by Kane Hodder as Jason. And one thing I really respect about Kane, and I really enjoy, is that Kane wears just playing the Jason character on his sleeve. Like, he's very proud of it. He doesn't shy away from it. He loves the franchise, clearly, and I really respect that about Kane. I also think in this movie, honestly, it's not just a stunt guy behind the mask, behind the makeup. I think Kane does a really good job, in particular in this movie, of acting with Jason. We see Jason a lot without his mask in this movie, and Kane clearly, in my opinion, does a great job just portraying the character in those moments. And I've kind of mentioned this before, but when Kane plays the character, I like it. It's kind of a stockier, strong version of the Jason character. He's like kind of a little bit of a smaller version, but it just looks like this dude is made of lead. Like, there's that moment when Tina even makes him fall onto the staircase, which, you know, normally you'd probably just fall onto the staircase, right? But no, this dude, like I said, is like a rock and just falls right through the staircase. But yeah, Kane's version of the character, all 4 of them, I like how he portrays it. But yeah, I just think Kane does a great job acting as Jason in this movie. And so yeah, is it a little bit weird how they bring back Jason in this movie? So Tina's kind of standing at the edge of the water, I guess thinking about her dad, maybe wishing, oh, I wish I could bring him back from the dead, man. I'm so, I regret what I did, obviously. The water starts kind of boiling and stuff, and then that brings back Jason. Kind of a little weird, but one thing in this movie we have to talk about, absolutely, is the kills. And yeah, the kills in this movie are without question the biggest what if in this movie, and maybe the biggest what if in the entire franchise, because in Part 7, virtually every single kill in this movie is completely cut down by the MPAA. It just sucks that the MPAA during this time span, during this kind of era, was butchering these movies as bad as it did, because this movie in particular especially had some potential to have, in the theatrical normal version that we do get, some really damn good kills. We still get some pretty solid kills in this movie, like the sleeping bag kill, obviously one of the fan favorites in the franchise, a kill that I personally do really enjoy, a kill that Kane Hodder even says is his favorite kill of the Jason character that he's portrayed, that he's ever done. A great kill, not the bloodiest kill in the franchise, but just one of those kills where you're like, holy shit, it makes you laugh, it shocks you. It's sudden. It does what kills, like what I look for in a lot of the kills that I enjoy, especially in Friday the 13th in particular. Also, Melissa's death too is a fun one, which also got cut down a little bit with the axe in the head. They cut out that part a little bit, but yeah, Jason just puts it right into her head and then just throws her to the side like a sack of potatoes. So we still do get some fun kills in this movie. But man, if the other kills in the movie weren't so cut down, this movie would be elevated to, in my opinion, a totally different level in the franchise. I mean, even just talking about kills like that guy who gets his head crushed next to the van, the original version of this kill that got cut, that we can still see the footage of, even though it's grainy and pretty shitty, was a glorious kill, man. They basically built this collapsible head that Kane Hodder could essentially just squish down completely, and it was juicy, blood squirting out of the head. Just a kill that could have been, if it was in the normal version of the movie, a hell of a lot of fun. I mean, at least if they were going to give us one good kill, it should have at least been the Dr. Cruz kill. Come on. You couldn't have at least given us that one? I mean, in the grainy, deleted version of that kill, it's pretty fun how Jason takes the saw and it kind of lingers a little bit longer. You can kind of see the insides of him coming out on that kill. It looked like a fun kill. And man, I mean, of course, I wish they would have done it up a little bit more. But if we just got that version in the movie, out of all the other kills that got cut, if Dr. Cruz was in there a little bit, that at least would have been pretty satisfying. And also the kills that we do get a little bit more of, I mean, they're not super gory, the ones that are left in the movie. They're also just pretty mediocre, like that girl when she gets thrown out the window and then they show the landing. It's like clearly that's a stunt person who's just jumping 2 feet and landing on the ground. That's a letdown as well. And then the guy who's on the couch and gets the machete to the neck, you can clearly see the machete stopping right at his neck. So the ones that we do kind of get a little bit more of are definitely a letdown as well. But like I said, man, if the kills in this movie were not cut down, if this movie came out maybe in a little bit of a different era where the MPAA was a little bit more lenient, man, what could have been? But like I said, this movie does have some things that I do really like in it. We already talked about Jason, we already talked about Kane Hodder, but also there's this shot later on in the movie. It's a small moment, but it's something that I like, where you see Jason in the corner of the room while the guy, after having sex, is going down in the kitchen to get something to eat. And just as the lightning flashes, you can see Jason kind of standing in the corner. It's a great shot, kind of a unique shot for the franchise for me. And also something that I really liked in this particular movie, because there are times in this movie where Jason is just kind of like a robot, you know, zombie just marching through, killing people left and right. But this moment shows that, okay, Jason is still kind of sneaking around a little bit, which is something that I do like in the Jason character. And yeah, in this movie, they do way overuse that typical trope of the killer walking and the victim sprinting, but the killer's still able to keep up, which is not a trope that I hate in the genre by any means. It's something that we're very used to, but I feel like in this movie, they do overuse that. I feel like we're getting a lot of scenes where the victims are in the woods sprinting, and they show you exactly kind of the pace that they're running at, and then they show you the pace that Jason's running at, which, you know, he's barely even walking and these people are at a full sprint, and he's just constantly catching up with them. Like I said, it's a typical horror trope, but still, I feel like they use it just a little too much in this movie. All right, now let's talk about Tina here for a second. So with Tina, they wanted to create a final girl that was basically like Jason's match, a final girl who is virtually just as powerful as Jason. So Tina is by no means my favorite final girl in the franchise. I do have a video on my channel ranking all of the final girls in the Friday the 13th franchise if you want to check that out. So like I said, not my favorite final girl, but there is no question Tina is the most powerful final girl in this entire franchise. I mean, she's electrocuting Jason, she's dropping the deck on him, she's lighting him on fire, which also props to Kane Hodder for doing that fire walk, which up until that point in time was the longest fire walk, I believe, in movie history, something like 40 seconds, which is kind of crazy. So yeah, Tina, obviously a character inspired by a character like Carrie, is basically kicking Jason's ass throughout that big chunk of the end of this movie. I also think the big explosion of the house kind of an epic explosion, epic moment for a Friday movie. But when her dad pops out of the lake, pops through the deck and pulls Jason into the lake, I don't know, that's a little bit of a weird moment. I kind of like the original idea they were going to go with that character, which was to create the dad looking more like a zombie, looking like somebody who has actually been in the lake for a very long time. But unfortunately, one of the producers thought it was a stupid idea or thought the makeup looked stupid and ended up just cutting that from their shot list, basically. But yeah, that whole moment, not great. They could have also gone totally batshit crazy with the end of this movie when Tina's on the stretcher being carried away, asking for Nick. What if they had one of the guys say, "Ma'am, what are you talking about? We didn't see any other boy." And then it kind of would have made you think like, oh, holy shit. What was real and what wasn't real in this movie? And also the director wanted to make a part 2 to part 7. Basically, we would continue to follow Tina. She gets taken to an asylum because she got accused of all of the murders that happened here, because obviously a story about a guy coming out of a lake, Jason Voorhees, killing everybody, a little bit unbelievable. So she would get accused for the murders, and then Jason would show up at the asylum and just would start slaughtering all of the doctors and nurses and patients. Kind of a story that would have been pretty damn cool. I mean, I would have been down for that for sure. But yeah, in the end, part 7 is definitely a movie that has a lot of things that I do really enjoy, but also, like I mentioned, has some things that I do think were kind of a weird direction for the franchise, a weird direction, weird creative choices for the movie. But like I said, is without question probably the movie in this franchise that has the biggest what if. Man, if we could have gotten those kills, if we do somehow eventually get those kills added back into this movie with the footage that they have of those kills, I'm not sure if it's possible, but man, if one day we can get that, that would be absolutely amazing. But of course, now we need to move along to part 8. Friday the 13th, part 8. Jason Takes Manhattan from 1989. Which, yes, of course, is basically Jason takes a boat, because the majority of the movie does take place on the boat. I don't think it's till like an hour and 4 minutes into the movie that Jason is climbing up that ladder and does finally get to New York in the movie, which kind of crazy, over an hour into the movie. So clearly the sort of misleading kind of marketing for this movie, obviously, Jason Takes Manhattan, the misleading marketing didn't help this movie, which, along with Jason Goes to Hell, the two kind of least successful financially movies in the franchise. With that said, though, I actually do really like this cruise ship setting for a slasher movie. I don't know, it just feels kind of unique for the subgenre. But in the early stages of the movie, I mean, we're just getting like that full-on grunge vibe immediately on display in this movie. I mean, people are getting mugged in the alley, people are shooting up, there's rats, there's like this green slime. Kind of reminds me of the Ninja Turtles movie from 1990. We get the shots of the subway, just kind of the less glamorous, more dark, gritty side of a city like New York, which is also kind of weird because then we transport to, Vancouver, supposed to be Crystal Lake, but just like a totally different setting, and then we don't see that setting again, like I said, for like another hour, which, definitely a little weird. But yeah, I'd imagine if I was able to see this movie opening weekend in the theater, which I wasn't, that I would be kind of buckled up after that introduction. Like, okay, how are they going to introduce Jason to New York? How is he going to get there? I'm interested. That would definitely keep me invested for the rest of the movie. So basically, this go around in this movie, we're following this Lakeview High School graduating class that's taking kind of a graduation trip on this cruise ship to New York, which also we see that shot of like that small yacht in Crystal Lake, which is kind of weird. It's like, okay, we now have these little yachts driving around Crystal Lake. Thought Crystal Lake was a little bit smaller than that, but anyways. But how are they going to bring back Jason in this movie? So it's this couple, they're on this boat, they're getting cozy. You know what they're going to do, but yeah, they throw down their anchor, which trips like an electrical wire that, feeds the electricity into Camp Crystal Lake, which just, basically electrocutes Jason, something we've seen many times before in the franchise. And yes, kind of resurrects him, wakes him up, whatever you want to say. And yep, then Jason hops back on their boat and starts having some fun. And kind of like part 7, we get another sort of like villain outside of Jason in this story, Uncle Charles, who's mostly just kind of an uptight hard ass for the most part. But yeah, another one of those characters that makes me want to stick around through the rest of the story to find out, okay, how is Jason gonna kill this guy? Oh yeah, but we also have the prom queen Tamara too, as kind of sort of like a villain as well. I mean, the girl pushes Rennie into the ocean. Speaking of Rennie, in my opinion, she's definitely one of the more bland final girls in the franchise. Not horrible or anything like that, but just pretty bland. It's like, come on, Rennie, give us a little personality. Also, Rennie's visions, where she's always seeing little Jason, obviously that ties into some trauma that she had earlier in her life, but the visions are kind of weird. I also think the little Jason, just how they implement that character, is also a little weird. Didn't have anything to do with the child actor. You know, I think he's fine, I guess. The kid was actually the editor of this movie's son, but just more so like the kid looks different in basically every vision. I also think the prosthetics with the kid were not great at all. They clearly look kind of janky. But also Rennie's boyfriend or love interest in this movie, Sean, definitely one of the more forgettable main characters in the entire Friday the 13th franchise, in my opinion. Kind of like Rennie, just pretty bland in a lot of ways. Maybe it wasn't really his fault. I think he got added into the production 2 weeks after they started because they fired the other guy. So I don't know, maybe it wasn't his fault. It didn't have a lot of time to prepare, but still, regardless of that, Sean's just kind of a forgettable character. I mean, with Sean, I also laugh at parts like at the end of the movie when Rennie and Sean are in Times Square. Sean's like holding onto her arm, clutched, all nervous, and Rennie just seems like she's kind of chill. It's like, come on, man. Now let's talk about the kills in Jason Takes Manhattan. So very similar to Part 7, this is another movie where the MPAA just made it really, really hard for this movie to get an R rating. They had to cut down a lot of the kills. And I would probably say Jason Takes Manhattan, just on average, probably has the worst kills in the franchise. There really isn't a single kill in this movie that really stands out as like a top 5, top 10 kill in the franchise, in my opinion. Yes, there are some decent ones, but they're just on average not that great. And like I said, probably the worst in the franchise. Like that kill where the Admiral gets his throat slit. It's like, come on, man. We could clearly already see the line was already there. He just had to move his neck up. Plus, Jason goes up to him and barely even touches the guy's neck. And it's like, okay, if you can't pull off that kill, maybe pull the camera back a little bit so we can't really see it. And I get it, you're in like this little cockpit of the cruise ship. I understand that, but still, a very janky, obviously a kill not pulled off very well that every time I watch this movie all these years later always stands out as a moment I'm like, really? I mean, the end of the Julius kill, yeah, that's a fun one. Definitely a fan favorite, especially when you just talk about this movie in particular. Take your best shot, motherfucker. I mean, that is fun, but what's leading up to that kill, the fight, I feel like it's kind of drawn out and kind of just drags for me. There's really no music at all. And it's like, all right, can we just get on with it? I prefer the kills that are a little bit more like of a holy shit, a little bit quicker, but just like, whoa, what just happened? I need to rewind that. Kind of makes you laugh, but also like kind of makes you freak out a little bit. I like those. And like I said, this is a fun kill. I believe it was an honorable mention when I talked about my top 13 kills in the franchise, but still kind of a kill. It's like, all right, guys, let's just get on with it. I do wish they could have done the Julius fight with Jason in Madison Square Garden like they originally wanted to. That would have been pretty damn epic. But honestly, the more I watch this movie, my favorite kill might be the guitar kill. Yes, it's quick, and yes, it's not the goriest kill in the movie, but especially when you see the aftermath when they find her dead body with like the huge hole in it. I don't know. It's also that rock and roll element of this movie, which I do like. It's incorporating that, which is really cool. But yeah, that is probably my favorite kill in the movie. But to me, one of the best parts about Jason Takes Manhattan is just the look of Jason. And first, I want to talk about the mask. I love this yellowish look to the mask. A lot of masks in this franchise, well, some of the masks don't look like they have real weathering. It looks like it was done in like an effects studio or something like that. But I don't know, there's something about the Jason Takes Manhattan mask. It looks like it actually has like a real patina to it. I love this yellowish look to the mask with like the little metal belt buckles on it, the smaller chevrons. I don't know, there's just something about this mask that not only fits this movie so well, but it's easily one of my favorite masks in the franchise. I do have a video ranking my favorite masks, hockey masks, in the franchise. And yeah, spoiler, this is definitely one of my favorites in the franchise. But just the overall look of Jason is great and fits this movie so well. Like, he just looks wet and worn and just like nasty and moist, especially the face underneath the mask that we see later on at the end of the movie. Speaking of the end of the movie, in part 8, we definitely get one of the most definitive deaths for Jason in this entire franchise, which was something they were trying to do. Basically, Jason at the end of the movie turns back into the young boy that we saw earlier in the franchise, which is supposed to kind of just mean that Jason is completely gone. Now, I like every movie in this franchise to a certain extent. I'm a huge Friday the 13th fan just in general, but overall with part 8, I can't imagine this movie ever really moving into my personal top 5 in the franchise. I think this entry is mostly just a bland entry in the franchise. To me, it doesn't have great kills. It doesn't really have fun characters. And it also doesn't have like that summer camp, woodsy setting that I prefer in some of my more favorite movies that I enjoy just a little bit more in the franchise. But overall, yeah, it does have a lot of charm. It does have some fun moments. Like I mentioned, a great look of Jason, one of my favorite looks of Jason in the entire franchise. So yeah, some good things, some bad things, but overall, a mostly kind of more bland entry in the franchise. All right, now are you guys ready to talk about arguably the most divisive Friday the 13th movie in the entire franchise? Probably kind of neck and neck with part 5. All right, let's do it. Let's talk about Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday from 1993, which definitely came out at kind of a weird time, especially for the big horror franchises at that time. Elm Street, Friday the 13th. The franchises were in a lot of ways going pretty downhill. So director Adam Marcus, who actually went on to help write the Texas Chainsaw 3D movie later, which is a crazy movie in itself. That's a topic for another time though. But Adam, I believe this was his directorial debut. He was like 23, 24 years old at the time, super young, but he grew up obsessed with the Evil Dead franchise, and you'll clearly notice some of the parallels between that movie and this movie, especially later on in Jason Goes to Hell. He definitely wanted to put kind of a bit of that Evil Dead flavor into the Friday the 13th franchise. So one question that a lot of people have with Jason Goes to Hell is not only how did Jason come back in this movie, but how did Jason become this thing in this movie that we see throughout it that's so different than the Jason we've seen in earlier parts of the franchise? Well, even the director has admitted that Jason is basically a Deadite in this movie. If you're familiar with the Evil Dead franchise, you know what I'm talking about. But apparently, Mama Voorhees read from the Necronomicon, which we'll see later on in Jason Goes to Hell, which has created this thing, this Jason body swapping thing that we see in this movie, which, yeah, to me is a little bit weird because it's not really like an homage, but it's also not like a collaboration officially between the franchises, but at the same time, it's also like so obvious as well. I don't know, it is kind of weird. And yeah, the Jason that we love, the Jason that we've kind of come accustomed to over the years, is barely in this movie. So just that in itself is already gonna piss off a lot of fans. And then there's gonna be other people that are gonna think, oh, this is amazing because it's different, especially when you're binging through the franchise. It's always nice to kind of get something a little bit fresh. So there's something to be said about that for me personally as well. But also it's kind of like the tried and true formula for the franchise. Its core essence of the franchise is kind of what we love. But Jason basically in this movie is swapping bodies, right? His soul, his evil, but his evil is also too much for a human body, basically. And essentially over time breaks down these human bodies. It's just too much. It ruins the body. So he has to constantly swap bodies until, hopefully for his sake, he's one day able to return to his earlier form, which is an idea and a concept on its face that really isn't that bad. But to me, the execution of it in this movie, I don't think it was all that great. And the early stages of Jason Goes to Hell is kind of funny because it's very much back to basics. We're following this girl. She's going to a cabin in the woods in Crystal Lake. Jason's going to show up, who, by the way, she might be one of the hottest girls in the entire franchise. Also, she is a damn pro at tying a bath towel because look at that thing. That thing is not moving at all. But like I said, it's very much back to basics. And Adam Marcus kind of wanted to do this in kind of almost like a self-referential, funny kind of a way, playing into the normal tropes that we're very much used to in this franchise and also in movies that were inspired by Friday the 13th. He was just packing in all of these normal tropes in, just a few minutes, just as kind of like a wink, kind of a little bit of a chuckle to the fans, obviously, and then twisting it into like this big sting operation where Jason is getting shot. It's this trap, and then eventually he just gets blown up in the beginning of the movie, which immediately you're like, oh, this is kind of crazy. Like, what is the direction they're going to go with this? And I get what Adam Marcus was going for here, because he's even said this in interviews, how up to this point in the franchise, with how many people Jason has killed, it wouldn't just be the local police after this guy. It would be like the federal marshals, the FBI, whatever have you, and this would be a huge deal, and they would eventually take Jason down, because in the end, he's mostly just a physical life form that they could find. So I get that aspect of it, and I get the idea, but I also think Marcus is kind of just missing what makes the franchise great. It's not always that realism, what would make the most logical sense. It's really leaning into what people love about the franchise. And honestly, Adam Marcus seems like a really interesting, cool guy who really loves not only the horror genre, but Friday the 13th as well. I would love to meet him someday and chat with him, because he's really engaging. Some of the interviews that I've seen of him, some of the behind the scenes stuff that they put on the Blu-rays and things like that, really interesting stuff. Like, he's a fun guy to listen to. But with that said, I do kind of disagree with his whole rebuttal when he hears fans say things like Jason Goes to Hell is an unbelievable story that feels very weird for the franchise. And I understand, with things like, oh, Jason even just coming back in part 2 and the other things in the franchise that seem very supernatural and clearly don't make any sense. But in my opinion, when it comes to Jason Goes to Hell, a lot of those things are like more nuanced, small things that kind of the more seasoned fans would know, not necessarily the casual people. Whereas a movie like Jason Goes to Hell, you watch it and anyone will notice just the craziness of what the hell is happening here. Not to say that all the stuff that they do in Jason Goes to Hell, going out on a limb, taking a swing, which I respect, making kind of a new approach for the franchise, which I also respect, not to say that all of that stuff is bad, but I'm just saying that some of the stuff that doesn't really make much sense earlier in the franchise is kind of a little more, like I said, nuanced, a little smaller, a little harder to notice. Whereas in Jason Goes to Hell, it's just kind of more in your face. And yeah, of course, Jason Goes to Hell introduces one of the craziest main characters in the entire franchise, Creighton Duke, this wild bounty hunter, but overall a character that's actually pretty fun. A character that I wish we could have gotten to see a little bit more of. A character also I wish they would have died off in a better way. He just dies with like this big bear hug. I mean, they should have at least like snapped the dude in half or something cool. Now, say what you want about Jason Goes to Hell, but there is no question, in my opinion, that this movie has one of the best kills in the entire franchise. That kill in the tent, you know what I'm talking about, but just also the anticipation of the kill, how Jason's essence, this person that Jason has taken over, is like slowly walking towards the tent. It kind of lingers and lingers, and there's this big anticipation, like, what's gonna happen here? And then he takes like that fence post right up through the girl. The guy is kind of looking through the big piece of her that's opened up on her body. It's one of those kills. It is so damn good. And not to spoil anything, but like I said, I do have a ranking of my top 13 kills in the Friday the 13th franchise. And this kill is definitely in the top 3, but just a kill that has everything that kind of hits those beats for me. It's kind of quick, but shocking. It's a holy shit moment. It's gory. It makes me laugh. It kind of hits all of those things. And also is one of those kills you're like, I have to rewind this. I gotta see what just happened. Just a crazy kill. And on top of that, it's actually a kill that they added 6 months after they had kind of almost the final cut of the movie. Basically, they had a test screening for the movie, and New Line was like, all right, we need more kids getting killed in the woods for this movie. I think that'll work. So 6 months after that test screening, they eventually added this scene, and hell yeah, I obviously am very glad that they did. I also don't know why, but that kill when Jason smashes that lady's head in the door frame of the car, it's so quick, but I don't know what it is. It makes me laugh every single time. What doesn't really make me laugh though is that whole scene with Creighton and the other dude in the jail, and he's trying to get information from him, and he's like, "You gotta pay, give me your little hand," and he just snaps his finger for information. That scene to me is a completely dumb, absurd scene in the movie. So do I hate the fact that they implement more backstory stuff for Jason, more stuff just about Jason's family just in general? No, not really. That doesn't really bother me. I feel like they were going to do that eventually as long as they kept pumping out these movies. It was bound to happen. Just so happens that it had to occur in, one of the worst movies in the franchise. But so yeah, the waitress that we see in this movie turns out to be Jason's sister, who also has a daughter, who also has a newborn baby as well. And yeah, does that make a lot of sense in comparison to the story and kind of what happens in the earlier movies in the franchise? No, probably not. We would have heard or seen something with her most likely earlier in the franchise, but it's kind of just whatever. So yeah, the big part of that and how that intertwines with the story is basically that the blood relatives are the only ones that can kill Jason or make Jason reborn into his natural form. How the hell does Jason know that? No clue. I do though like the fact that they implement the Voorhees house in this movie. I feel like that's something they could have done earlier in the franchise, and to me would have been pretty interesting and pretty effective. And yeah, to go back to the Evil Dead stuff that I mentioned earlier, it's kind of funny that Sam Raimi actually legitimately let Adam Marcus use the Necronomicon from Army of Darkness in this movie. He was kind of hanging out on set. He knew some people involved with the production, with the effects and things like that, and was hanging out and just eventually asked Sam Raimi if he could use the Necronomicon in Jason Goes to Hell. So if you notice that book, if it looks really familiar, yeah, there's a reason behind that. He just slipped it into a plastic bag for him. I was like, here you go. You can borrow this for a little bit. Which, like I said earlier, I don't know. It just feels kind of weird. And nothing against the Evil Dead franchise. There's some movies in that franchise that I do really enjoy. But like I said, it's not really like an homage, but it's not an official kind of like collaboration between the two franchises. But it's clearly in the movie and it's now canon. I don't know. I don't really have another way to put it other than the fact that it just kind of feels a little weird. Another moment that feels weird in this movie to me, other than the fact that Jason is swapping bodies throughout the entire movie, is kind of towards the end when that guy, the newscaster guy, is in the police station killing people, and then he's also back at the diner. I don't know. It feels more like a zombie movie than it does a Friday the 13th movie. And I know Jason at other points in the franchise, in part 7 and some other points, very much feels like a zombie and is basically zombie Jason. I get that. But now that he's in this kind of human form, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like a Friday the 13th movie. We do, though, get some cool effects towards the end of this movie when that little demon creature, little baby Freddy thing crawls out of that guy's neck and then crawls into Jason's sister's, you know what I'm talking about. And yeah, eventually Jason gets defeated by that Power Rangers sword thing, which apparently was also inspired by the Evil Dead franchise. But I like this idea of Jason being pulled down to hell. And then of course, we get one of the biggest holy shit moments in the franchise. You get that tranquil music, kind of very similar to the tranquil, kind of calming music in the original Friday the 13th before that big moment. And then bam, all of a sudden we get Freddy Krueger's glove pulling Jason's mask down to hell. They really missed an opportunity here, though. They should have had the dog do that flaming piss thing like they did in Elm Street Part 4. No, but in all seriousness, for a just wild and weird movie, it's actually kind of a fun ending. But overall, do I hate Jason Goes to Hell? No, but to me, it's definitely one of the least rewatchable movies in the franchise. Also, thank God they added that whole tent kill scene because that is an incredible kill. But there you go, everybody. That is my thoughts on kind of the rise and fall of Friday the 13th, 7, 8, and 9. Thanks so much for watching. If you want some more Friday the 13th content from me right now, go ahead and check out one of these videos next to me. If you don't want to miss future videos on the channel, the best way to do that is to make sure you subscribe. My name is Matt, and I will talk to you all in the next one.